Welcome back to the Beyond the Groom Podcast. My name is Jordan Michael Colson, and my distinguished guest at this time, one Stephen Tadros, is the manager of business development by day, but by night, he is a devilishly handsome, devilishly talented, trilingual, world-class crooner, singer, performer, and so much more. We're here today to talk about life, talk about business, a little creativity, a little artistry, and we're going to get to know the man who holds it down and currently resides in the mean streets of Savannah, Georgia. Stephen, welcome to the Beyond the Groom Podcast. Thrilled to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. And thank you for that intro. That's brilliant. Hope I can live up to it.
Well, first and foremost, because we're going to get to the vast array of things here, because you are a dynamic individual, to say the least. First and foremost, other than tell people what to do, what does a manager of business development do, both in the grooming world or just in general business practice?
Well, in this particular case with ISB USA, it was basically to come in, step back first of all, and watch what was going on, what they were doing before my arrival, because I needed to understand the market, the clientele, so on and so forth, and of course the employees that were working. And then my whole idea was to try to make everybody's life easier, because there was a high level of stress. Dr. Favor especially, Suzanne, constantly on the phone. So my idea or my goal was to try to streamline as much as possible for everyone, and by doing that, giving more time for others that were probably not getting enough time, hence, growing the business, but keeping that hands-on approach and that personal relationship with everybody. That's kind of my goal in my head,
When you come into a company and you sort of have to ruffle feathers, and I don't mean that in a negative way in any connotation, but your job is to keep people on track. And no matter how strong your ego is, nobody really likes to be told initially that, hey, I need you to pick it up here. I need you to do this, or, hey, are you doing this? And you're not a micromanager in any sense of the word, but how do you walk the line of maintaining a friendly and cordial relationship with fellow staff members and also sort of being a taskmaster and driving it forward?
Well, I think keeping a friendly relationship with everyone and being very involved in the day-to-day stuff and knowing exactly what goes on behind the scenes, be very familiar of your territory, put it that way, which is what I said in the very beginning. I came in, I just kind of didn't shut up, but I didn't come in going, hey, I do this, I know this, I've done that. No, because this is a completely different country from where I was before. It's a different approach. There's a whole bunch of stuff I needed to learn, and I'm still learning. I'm still getting the grip of it. It's not over yet, But walking that fine line, I think it comes down to, first of all, one of the first things that I implemented was staff meetings, which weren't really being done in the beginning. And it might sound silly, but we basically have our weekly appointment now, and it's a chance for all of us to get stuff off our chest. First of all, that happens during the week. We tell each other what we're doing, and at that point, once we allocate tasks to different individuals, including myself, automatically you're creating accountability, which hence in the next meeting, you're like, okay, for example, a task, you have this to do. When do you think you can do it? And the person will answer, I can do it by Friday. Great. I'll write it down. And then by Friday, I'll be like, hey, so it's basically, it's micromanaging, but in a sense, I'm just repeating what the person told me they would do, sort of more or less. That's kind of like a team coach, I guess. I've never coached a baseball team or a basketball team, but I'm pretty sure it's something similar.
Holding people accountable in any walk of life is of the utmost importance. We know that neither of us are groomers here, as we're on the Beyond the Groom podcast, ironically, but what is your background as far as what did you know about grooming when you came in? And did you have any misconceptions or preconceived notions about what it actually is? Quick story. This is not about me, but I will just tell you an example in my life. The first time I walked into a trade show when I had first met Dr. Favor and Suzanne and part of the team at ISB, I walked into Hershey and my eyes opened up to this other world of colorful personalities and craziness. And I saw tens of thousands of people. I said, oh, this world is a lot larger than I ever imagined. And people take their animals and their care very, very seriously. So my preconceived notion was I thought it was more of a bubble, and it is in a way, but it's massive. So what was your background when you joined Team ISB, and what did you think it was going to be versus what really came to fruition?
Well, if you're telling me I joined ISB, because don't forget, I joined ISB USA in 2021, but I've been involved with the Italian headquarters since 2004. So if you're asking your question when I entered in 2004 in the very beginning, I knew zero, nothing. And it was what astonished me, I guess, first of all, was how much revenue, on an international scale, on a national scale, was spent on our pets. Now I do know because I had a couple of dogs, and I know how much we spend, but I didn't realize how much we really genuinely care for our pets, especially the grooming industry, which blew me out of the water, because I didn't realize it was such a well-respected profession, and it's getting more and more respected as we move along, because we have to remember that the grooming industry is probably around 30 or 40 years behind the hairdressing industry for us, right? So if we look back, into the 50s, you had barbers, you had some salons, but now you've got these really high-end L'Oreal and Paul Mitchell salons and all that. So the grooming industry is sort of slowly following that as its inspiration, if you will. So I saw all that happening since 2004, and it just keeps shooting up. Just to give you a small statistic, in 2022, the pet industry in the US alone generated $122 billion of revenue. That is a lot of money, and about 30% of that is our industry, so the pet care industry, because most of it is allocated to food, which I'm sure you can understand. So just giving those numbers, I mean, statistically, people spend more on their pets than they do on their own kids. So there you have it. I've blown away just like you. I mean, I still continue to be blown away every time I travel. I've had the fortune of traveling the world, literally, every corner of the world for this industry, and I've seen all walks of life. But the genuine base of the entire thing is that care for these animals, their pets. Doesn't change anywhere. It's the same thing all over the world.
What would you say you love most about working in the position in the industry now in 2023?
Wow, that's a good question. I think the fact that I meet different walks of life. I meet different people from different parts of the country, because I lived in Europe most of my life, so coming to the United States, you think the United States is just this one big country, everybody's the same. It's not at all. You go from north to south to east to west, and things change, weather changes, food changes, people change, and that's super interesting to me. It always has been. So that's the part probably that I like the most, is the people part. I also like developing. I'm working on some projects right now to open up large salons, luxury type salons that you'll see in Europe. And I want to start bringing that into this country slowly. So those are one of my projects that I'm working on. So that's exciting. Yeah.
Well, we'll certainly get back to the grooming industry, but the world needs to know, Stephen. The world needs to become aware. Those who are not, shame on them. Those who are have witnessed the immersive Stephen Tadros experience. Now, if somebody wants to witness this experience that I'm describing right now, what can they expect when you actually take the stage, serenade the crowd, and rock a mic? Because I did some research and I finally got to hear those vocals, and it's insanely impressive. I had no idea. I know you spoke fluidly, you spoke well, you speak multiple languages, but you can sing your butt off. Where did that come from? Was that always in you? Did you take lessons? Where did this talent come from?
Well, geez, well, I've been a musician all my life. Probably since the age of 11 or so, I started playing the guitar and the piano, and I wanted to sing, so I taught myself the guitar and the piano because I really essentially wanted to sing. My inspirations were in the music of the 50s, so Elvis, Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis, Roy Orbison, Sam Cooke, these big voices, Sinatra, some of the crooners, Dean Martin, all that. So I put those in a pot, and I kind of just mingled with these sounds and these voices. And that's basically what you're going to get if you see me on stage. You're going to get a mix of those types of voices and those types of songs, which is, for me, that's where all these beautiful, beautiful songs and music started there. That's kind of like the basis of what we hear today. So I guess you could call me being a crooner with a little bit of a dash of rock and roll in it, kind of thing. I don't know, but yeah, that's what you can expect. As far as your question is concerned, did I take any lessons? I have had some formal training, vocal training, just to be able to last longer on stage, because I've always sung. Then you get to a point like, why am I losing my voice? I have a concert for a couple of hours. I got to do another one tomorrow, another one the day after. How do I do that? And there are ways you got to, know how to use your voice properly and take care of it. So I've learned those throughout the years because I needed to, as for my trade, if you will, because I did do this as a profession for a period of time in my life. So, but yeah, that's what someone could expect. Yes.
I gotta be honest. I thought when Suzanne and Dr. Favors first talked you up, I thought you'd be like good to above average. I didn't know you'd be like world class and could be performing like in Vegas. And all the names that you said, I certainly hear those influences. I also hear a little bit of Johnny Cash, who's one of my favorites.
Absolutely.
Sam Cooke and Johnny Cash are two of my favorite of all time, and I hear both of them. So if you ever perform in my neck of the woods, man, I'm there. But phenomenal.
Love it.
Now, something that's near and dear to my heart and probably to yours too. A lot of life skills and life lessons come from the arts, right? So how has learning music, learning to become a performer prepared you for business, for success, and for life in general?
That's a really good question. I think one of the things that, personally, I don't have much patience. I like things to be done quickly, as I'm sure you've noticed with my emails to you once in a while. So music is something that can't be rushed, if that makes any sense. So being a musician, learning a song takes time. Learning to sing a song, it can't be rushed. So I'd have to say most likely music has helped me with my patience. It's helped me become a bit more patient. That's as far as the training is concerned of becoming a musician. So when I sit at the piano, I want to learn a song. It doesn't happen like that. I got to work at it. It takes time, So, and business is the same thing. You can't walk into a meeting and expect it. Boom. There's a rhythm you got to look for. So timing. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. Timing. Music has helped me with my timing in business and in life in general. So that's probably where it's at. The second thing, and most likely as far as stage performing is concerned, and as far as, because I come from a theater background, I studied drama and theater in high school, so I was always on stage. And then dealing with your cast members or dealing with the audience after kind of helps you deal with all walks of life, different people. You'll get criticism, you'll get standing ovations, you'll get claps, and you'll get people that walk out while you're doing stuff. So you got to know how to deal with all those things and not take it too personally, which I do sometimes. I have to admit, I'm a human being like everybody else. So, but being an entertainer, that kind of helps you in the business thing. Third thing I have to say though, this is kind of a funny story. My music has helped me with bigger deals. When I was, living in Italy and working with Yves Saint Bernard, we would do, travels to Japan, to Singapore. We'd have to go there and close big distribution deals, because I was setting up distributions all over the world. And in the unwinding phase, when we're out for dinner somewhere, or, there's perhaps a piano in the room when I'm there and I'd sit at the piano, they would see a different side of me. And automatically, not that the music helped me close the deal, but it actually did, because they would see that human part of me. And they go, okay, well, he's not just this Doberman business guy that comes in and wants to close a deal. He's actually, wow, okay, so it's helped in that sense as well. It's just funny. A few times that's happened, and it's always enjoyable to do that.
There's no question that it helps, and it also strikes an emotional accord with so many people. And just extremely impressive. And I hope that's something that, regardless of how successful Yves Saint Bernard gets, I hope that's something that you continue to pursue for as long as you enjoy it, because you're actually very, very talented. So
well, that's actually funny you mentioned that. It's my side hustle. Like, some people go play tennis or whatever, and I play music. I had a gig last night in Hilton Head, about an hour from where I live, and I I go out, I do my 2 hours of music, I get paid, I get, I meet people and I come home and it feels good. It's my outlet, it's where I let off my steam, put it that way.
That's awesome. In addition to being a world-class crooner, you're also trilingual. So some may say you're a master of communication with people from all walks of life, from all parts of the earth. So how are you able to effectively communicate with groomers and people in your industry, especially as someone who comes from a bit of an outside perspective? Yes, you've been in it since 2004, a myriad of experience now in life and in the business, but how do you communicate and get your point across and strike business deals and strike accords with so many people from someone who does sort of come from the outside? Or are there just some universal traits or universal language that is across the board in all business that sort of translates?
It's a really good question, Jordan. I'd have to think about that. It comes kind of naturally to me because of how I grew up. I gotta open this parenthesis here because that way to understand. I was born in Montreal, so I'm Canadian, but I left Canada at a very young age. I was 3 years old. I moved to Egypt. So I was exposed to the Arabic language, for example, and the mannerisms and the way the body language moves in the Arabic world. My father was an Egyptian Lebanese and my mother is French Canadian. They spoke to each other in French. So at home we spoke in French, but I was put in school in English. So I had these two languages always in the house. So being around different cultures, living in Egypt as a very young child, and from there we moved to the Persian Gulf in the 80s. I was living in, now it's a very well-known place, Qatar, right? Everybody knows where Qatar is today, but back in 1981, nobody knew where that was. I lived in Doha for about 3 years. I went to British schools. I had a British accent up until the age of about 12. I lived in Dubai for 3 years as well in the 80s as a child. Left Dubai at 12 years old and moved back to Canada. So there I am. And while being in Dubai and in the Persian Gulf, you have to understand that all of the foreigners that were there, expats as we call them, are from all over the world. You got Australians, South Africa, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, everywhere, United States, Canada, Europe. The common language that we all spoke was and still is English, but everybody with their own accents and their own grammar mistakes, if you will, and their own body language. Like you could talk to an Italian and they'll be this close to you. You talk to a German and they're this far from you. Everybody's got their own little bubble kind of thing. So I learned that at a very, very young age, not even willingly. I was just exposed to it. So I got very, very lucky. So that has come in very handy when speaking to, presidents of a company or a groomer or whoever it is. I can kind of pick up on their mannerisms and body language almost instinctively, and then sort of make sure to articulate. Because what I have noticed, and it still bothers me, when you're traveling and you go to a foreign country and you see somebody who tells you they speak English, but it's obvious that it's not their first language, maybe their third language, and a mother tongue English person goes, "Oh, great," and just blabs out, speaking to them as if they're speaking to their cousin. I don't do that. What I'll do is I'll slow down, I'll articulate so that they understand me. And then, of course, sure enough, they'll tell me, "Stephen, I understand you, I don't understand him, but we're speaking the same language." So that has come in very handy. Another thing that is important is listening. I think one of the things that we're losing today a lot of, and I keep noticing this, is that people don't know how to listen.
So what ultimately brought you to Yves Saint Bernard in 2004 and then ultimately in 2021 to Dr. Faber and Suzanne?
Okay, so I was in Italy. I was a professional musician from 1998 to 2004. And in 2001, the Euro came out. And what happened was basically the music industry overnight lost all of their gigs almost, because what happened is we had the Italian lira and basically prices doubled overnight. I'm not going to get into the details, but literally doubled overnight. So what most of these venues did is, instead of, they couldn't, cut off the kitchen or remove the kitchen from their, their menu, they removed music. They removed live music and replaced it with a DJ or whatever. So instead of having a live band, the karaoke thing came out more and all that. So I went from doing maybe 17 or 18 gigs a month to like 6 or 7. And that was not going to pay the bills. So lucky for me, I mean, I speak 3 languages, Italian, of course, and being in the early 2000s in Italy, somebody that has some business background and sales background and speaks 3 languages, pretty easy to find a job. And I was basically sitting at my hairdresser, and he said, I got a friend of mine who's got this company and they sell cosmetics for the pet industry. I was like, oh, okay, give him a call. And that was Mirko Aringhieri, who's the founder and CEO of Yves Saint Bernard. I gave him a call in March 2004. He said he was looking for an export manager. The company was growing, he told me. He wanted to expand the export market. He needed somebody that could speak, English and other languages. We sat down for 10 minutes. He offered me the job. I went home. I think just thought about it for 3 days, called him back. I said yes. And I worked with Mirko and Yves Saint Bernard for about 13 years. And my job was, to get to your second question now, my job was to set up distributors worldwide. So we went from a small footprint of about maybe 15 or 12 distributors worldwide till when I left, we're about maybe over 30. And that was a lot of work with myself and Mirko traveling everywhere from Mexico, Japan, Singapore, China, all over Europe. We went everywhere. And eventually I started traveling alone without Mirko, because that was the whole point. So I had the whole export department under my belt, basically. And of course, one of the distributors that I set up was Dr. Favor. So he was my client. That was in 2009. And as I'm sure you can imagine, with a selection of distributors, there's a friendship can happen, right? Because you click with people, and you have good conversations, you have good talks. And Dr. Favor was one of those people, one of the few that we basically became friends, really. So it was always a pleasure to have him come to Italy, and I would take him around, and we really got along. Came to Phoenix a couple of times with Mirko, and it was lovely. And that was my experience meeting Dr. Favor for the first time. Then in 2020, the year of the pandemic, I left Italy. And I was looking for work. It was difficult. I had to go back to Montreal, and I was looking for work. And Mirko, who I mentioned before, him and I are still very close. I consider him like an uncle to me. He taught me a lot, and so we were still in touch. And he told me, he said, Stephen, if you're in North America, it was always our dream, Mirko and I, to open up in the United States and get a real thing going here. And I said, well, instead of doing that, let's reach out to Doc and see if we can somehow collaborate together, all 3 of us, sort of thing. So sure enough, I reached out to Cliff, and he was ecstatic to hear from me, of course. And I went down to see him in Phoenix, and I said I was looking for this and this and this. And he didn't really butt an eyelash. He said, Stephen, as a matter of fact, I thought about hiring you way back in the day, but I wasn't sure I could afford you, and the company wasn't ready at the time. But now we are, and that was it. 2021, we set down a bunch of goals and stuff like that, what I needed to do. He basically told me he needed to get a lot of stuff off his plate, because he was just doing everything. So that's basically, I went full circle. I went from being, Cliff being my client, to now he's, is my employer, really. But we're still friends. The foundation is still the same, so that's the story. That's how the story goes.
What makes Yves Saint Bernard different than any other brand or company that's in the industry?
Okay, well, we got to look at the history. Yves Saint Bernard is the pioneer in the industry. It's been around for 30 years. So anything or anybody that comes along after is basically riding the wave of Yves Saint Bernard. And I'm not saying that to be conceited. That is a fact. Yves Saint Bernard was the first company back in 1995, through extensive research, to discover that really there's only 3 types of coats. So today it's almost common knowledge. We talk about short, medium, and long coat. But guess what? That was Yves Saint Bernard that started that 30 years ago almost. Second thing that distinguishes Yves Saint Bernard from the rest is conditioners. It was the first company to actually introduce conditioners to the pet industry. There weren't before. And still today, there are a lot of groomers out there that don't use conditioners, and that is the secret to the company. That is the secret to a healthy coat. So those are basically the things that kind of distinguishes Yves Saint Bernard. And if you look at it today, other companies are riding that wave. They're doing the same thing. It was considered, gibberish or Arabic, 1995, talking about conditioners and 3 types of coat. Nobody, and there was a lot of seminars and work and education done to get to where we are today. And Dr. Faber is part of that. And he's still doing it today. We're still getting that word out there, educating.
Another thing that they do so well, I know the people in Italy a little bit, but I know obviously the United States branch a lot more with Suzanne and Dr. Faber and Heather and yourself. And I've never seen a company with people that are more invested in genuinely helping and genuinely caring for the people that they work with, almost to a detriment because they run themselves so thin. But I know it's from a wonderful place inside their heart, includling myself. I've called them at midnight because my cat was sick before, and they're there and they're up for some reason.
Yeah. Sounds about right. That sounds about right.
All right, Stephen, you've been awesome. We're going to get into our quick clip segment. Now, don't overthink anything. One word, one line, one thought responses. So the first one to get you acclimated, finish the sentence or finish the thought. The music industry of today, blank,
is struggling.
Do the artists suck today? Are there any good ones?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think we seek perfection too much, and I think imperfection has been lost. Hence, it just sounds all perfect, which to me is not really creative anymore.
Amen. All right, favorite dipping sauce?
Olive oil.
No one said that yet that I've ever asked. Good choice. Adult beverage of choice?
Wine.
How many glasses of wine do you need to get a nice buzz?
Well, I actually don't drink very much, but I can probably drink. I mean, I lived in Italy for half my life, so wine was just an everyday thing.
You can only perform one song for the rest of your life. What is that song?
Suspicious Minds.
You can only hear one song for the rest of your life. What is that song?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I got a bunch of songs coming in my head. Make You Feel My Love by Adele.
Oh, okay. A little bit of a more of a modern artist. See, they're not all terrible. All right. Finish the sentence. The best type of people, blank,
are the ones that are humble.
Favorite language to speak?
Italian.
Hardest language to learn?
Chinese.
Best experience while on stage?
Opening for a large band in Italy, and I had about 7,000 or 8,000 people in front of me.
Hard to beat that. All right. Years from now, we're talking decades, many decades from now, when you finally pass on and you get to the pearly gates, what do you hope God, or whatever you believe in, what do you hope he or she says to you?
You've been good.
Well, you've definitely been good. You've been great on this interview. We greatly appreciate you coming on the Beyond the Groom podcast, Stephen. You make the company Yves Saint Bernard go. You are truly one of the driving forces behind it, and I know it's going to continue to thrive in the future. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I look forward to doing it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.